and then we shall continue with chapter 106, The Share-Out. The first floor in the house on the Rue Saint-Germain-des-Prés, which Albert de Morcerf had chosen for his mother and himself, consisted of a little self-contained apartment which was rented to a very mysterious character. Not even the concierge had seen the man's face, either when he was coming in or going out. In winter he'd buried his chin in one of those red scarves that high-class coachmen wear while they are waiting for their masters to leave the theatre. In summer he was always blowing his nose just at the moment when he might have been seen going in front of the lodge. It must be said that, contrary to all usual practice, this inhabitant was not being spied on by anyone, and that the rumour going around that his alias disguised a most eminent personage, and one who could pull lots of strings, had led people to respect the mystery of his comings and goings. His visits were usually at fixed times, though sometimes delayed or brought forward, but almost always, winter and summer, he took possession of the apartment at 4 o'clock, but never stayed the night there. At 3:30, in winter, the fire was discreetly lit by the servant who had charge of the little apartment, and at 3:30 in summer, the same girl would bring up ices. At 4 o'clock, as we have said, the mysterious character would arrive. 20 minutes later, a carriage would stop in front of the house. A woman in black or dark blue, always wrapped in a huge veil, would get out, drift like a shadow in front of the concierge's lodge, and go up the stairs, though no one ever heard a single board creak under her light footsteps. Nor had anyone ever asked her where she was going. Her face, like the stranger's, was thus entirely unknown to the two doorkeepers, model concierges, and perhaps the only ones in the vast brotherhood of the capital's watchdogs who would have been capable of such discretion. Needless to say, she went up only as far as the first floor. She scratched in a special way on the door, which opened then closed tightly, and that's all. To leave the building, the same procedure was followed. The woman would go out first, always veiled, and get back into her carriage, which vanished sometimes down one end of the street, sometimes the other. Then, 20 minutes later, the stranger would go out in his turn, buried in his scarf or hidden behind his handkerchief, and he too would disappear. The day after the one on which Monte Cristo had paid his visit to Danglars, the day of Valentine's funeral, the mysterious occupier came in at around 10 o'clock in the morning instead of his usual time of 4 in the afternoon. Almost at once, without leaving the usual space of time, a hired cab arrived and the veiled lady quickly went up the stairs. The door opened and closed. But even before the door had closed, the lady exclaimed, "Oh, Lucien! Oh, my friend!" with the result that, for the first time, the concierge who had overheard the exclamation was made involuntarily aware that his tenant was called Lucien. But, being a model doorkeeper, he resolved not to mention it, even to his wife. "What is it, my dearest?" asked the man whose name the veiled lady had revealed in her anxiety or her haste. "Tell me." "My dear, can I count on you?" "Of course, as you very well know. What is wrong? Your note this morning was quite bewildering, the haste and disorder in your handwriting. Come, reassure me or terrify me entirely." "Lucien, something of great importance," she replied, scrutinizing him closely. "Monsieur Danglars left last night." "Left? Monsieur Danglars? Where has he gone?" "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know? Has he gone for good?" "Certainly. At 10 in the evening his horses took him to the barrier at Charenton. There he found a coach ready harnessed. He got in with his valet and told his coachman he was going to Fontainebleau." "So what did you mean—" "One moment, dear. He left me a letter." "A letter?" "Yes. Read it." and she reached in her pocket for an unsealed letter which she gave Debray. Before reading it, he hesitated, as if seeking to guess what it contained, or rather as if, whatever it contained, he had decided to make up his mind in advance. After a few moments, his decision had no doubt been reached, because he began to read. The following were the contents of the letter that had so disturbed Madame Danglars. Madame, my most faithful wife. Unconsciously, Debray stopped and looked at the Baroness, who blushed to the roots of her hair. "Read it," she said. Debray went on. "When you receive this letter, you will no longer have a husband. Oh, don't be too alarmed. You will not have a husband in the sense that you no longer have a daughter, by which I mean that I shall be on one of the 30 or 40 roads leading out of France. I owe you an explanation, and since you are a woman who will understand it perfectly, I shall give it to you. Here it is. This morning I received a demand for payment of 5 million, and I honoured it. Another for the same amount followed almost immediately. I adjourned it until tomorrow, and I am leaving today to avoid that tomorrow which would be too unpleasant for me to bear. You do understand, do you not, Madame and most precious wife? If I say you do understand, it is because you know my affairs as well as I do myself. You may even know them better than I do, since I should be unable to say, if anyone were to ask me, where at least half of my fortune has vanished, though it was once quite considerable, while I am certain that you, on the contrary, would be entirely capable of doing so. Women have infallible instincts, and can explain even miracles by an algebra of their own devising. I know only my figures, and I knew nothing from the day when my figures began to deceive me. Have you ever admired the rapidity of my fall, madame? Have you been slightly dazzled by the bright flame that has devoured my ingots? I must confess that I saw only fire, but let's hope that you managed to find some gold in the ashes. It is with that consolation that I depart, madame, my most prudent spouse, without the slightest pricking of conscience at abandoning you. You still have your friends, the ashes I mentioned, and to complete your happiness, the freedom that I hasten to give you. However, madame, the moment has come to introduce a word or two on more intimate matters. As long as I hoped you were working for the good of our family and the prosperity of our daughter, I philosophically turned a blind eye. But since you have brought our house to ruin, I do not wish to provide a foundation for another man's wealth. I took you rich, but with little honour. Forgive me for speaking so frankly, but since it is probable that only we will read these words, I do not see why I should mince them. I increased our wealth, which continued to grow for more than 15 years, until the moment when these unknown catastrophes, which I am still unable to comprehend, arrived to seize it and cast it down, without my being to blame, I might say, for any of it. You, madame, have been working solely to increase your own wealth, and that, I am certain in my own mind, you have managed to do. So, I shall leave you as I found you, rich, but scarcely honourable. Adieu. From now on, I too shall start to work for my own benefit. Accept the assurance of my gratitude for the example which you have given me, and which I shall follow. Your most devoted husband, Baron Danglars. The Baroness had been watching Debray during the long and painful reading of this letter, and despite his well-known self-control, she had seen the young man change colour once or twice. When he had finished, he slowly refolded the paper and resumed his pensive attitude. "Well?" Madame Danglars asked, with understandable anxiety. "Well, madame?" Debray repeated mechanically. "What do you think of this letter?" Very simple. I think Monsieur Danglars was suspicious. Of course he was, but what do you have to tell me? I don't follow you, Debray said, icy cold. He has left, altogether gone, left never to return. Oh, Debray said, don't think that, Baroness. I tell you, he will never come back. I know him. He is quite unshakable in any resolution that reflects his own interests. If he had thought me of any use to him, he would have taken me. If he has left me in Paris, it is because the separation can serve his own ends. This means that he will never change his mind, and that I am free for ever. Madame Danglars added, with the same pleading expression. But Debray, instead of answering, left her poised in the same anxious and questioning state of mind and posture. "What?" she said finally. "Do you not even answer me, monsieur?" "I have only one question to ask of you. What do you expect will become of you?" "I was going to ask you," the Baroness replied, her heart pounding. "Oh?" said Debray. "Are you asking for my advice, then?" "Yes, I would like your advice," the Baroness said through dry lips. "Well, if you're asking my advice," the young man said, "I would advise you to travel." "Travel?" muttered Madame Danglars. "Yes, indeed. As Monsieur Danglars said, you are rich and quite free. It will be absolutely necessary for you to leave Paris in any case, I should have thought, after the double scandal of Mademoiselle Eugénie's broken engagement and Monsieur Danglars' disappearance. All that matters is that everyone should know that you have been abandoned, and should think you poor, because a bankrupt's wife would not be forgiven her opulent style of life. To achieve this, all you need to do is to remain a fortnight in Paris, repeating to everyone that you have been abandoned, and telling your closest friends, who will repeat it to everyone, exactly how the desertion took place. Then you must move out of your mansion, leaving behind your jewels and relinquishing your dowry, and everybody will admire your disinterestedness and sing your praises. Then it will be known that you have been abandoned, and people will think you are poor. Only I know your true financial situation and will be willing to account to you for it as your loyal associate." Pale, devastated, the Baroness had listened to this speech with as much dread and despair as Debray had shown calm and indifference in delivering it. "Abandoned?" she repeated. "Oh, yes, indeed, abandoned. Yes, you are right, monsieur. No one will doubt my abandonment." These were the only words that a proud woman, deeply in love, could reply. "But rich, very rich," Debray continued, opening his wallet and spreading the few papers it contained across the table. Madame Danglars ignored him, being entirely taken up with quelling the beating of her heart and holding back the tears which she felt pricking at the corners of her eyes. Finally, her sense of self-respect got the upper hand, and though she could not suppress the beating of her heart, she did at least manage to avoid shedding a tear. "Madame," Debray said, "we have been associated for some 6 months. You contributed funds to the value of 100,000 francs. Our association dates from April this year. Our speculations began in May. In that month we made 450,000 francs. In June, profits amounted to 900,000. In July, we added a further 1,700,000 francs. That, as you know, was the month of the Spanish bonds. In August, at the start of the month, we lost 300,000, but by the 15th we had recovered our losses, and by the end of the month we had our revenge. Our accounts, brought up to date from the time when we formed our partnership to yesterday, when I closed them, give us assets amounting to 2,400,000 francs. That is to say, 1,200,000 francs each. Now," he continued, slamming his account book shut with the steady and methodical hand of a stockbroker, We find 80,000 francs for the compound interest on that sum which has remained in my hands." "But what is this interest?" the Baroness interrupted. "What does it mean, since you never invested the money?" "I beg your pardon, madame," Debray said coldly. "I had your authority to exploit it, and I took advantage of it. This means 40,000 francs is in interest for your half, plus the 100,000 francs of the original capital sum, that is to say 1,340,000 francs for your share. Well, madame," he continued, "I took the precaution of cashing your money in yesterday, not long ago, as you see. Anyone would think I had been expecting at any moment to be asked to account to you for it. It is there, half in banknotes, half in bills, payable to the bearer. I say there, and it's true. As I thought my house was not sufficiently secure, and a notary not discreet enough, and property speaks even louder than a notary. In short, since you do not have the right to buy or possess anything apart from the joint property of the marriage, I kept this entire sum, which is today your only fortune, in a safe at the bottom of this wardrobe, and to be even more secure, I did the carpentry myself. Now," he went on, opening first the wardrobe, then the safe, "here are 800 notes of 1,000 francs each, which, as you can see, resemble a thick iron-bound volume. To that I have added a bond for 25,000 francs, and finally, to make up the sum, which amounts, I believe, to something around 110,000 francs, here is a demand note on my banker, and since my banker is not Monsieur Danglars, the note will be honoured, I can assure you." Madame Danglars mechanically took the demand note, the bond, and the sheaf of banknotes. This vast fortune seemed to amount to very little, laid out in that way on the table. Madame Danglars, dry-eyed but with her breast swelling with sobs, picked it up and shut the steel-bound pouch in her case, put the bond and the demand note in her portfolio, and stood, pale and silent, waiting for one kind word that might console her for being so rich. But she waited in vain. "Now, madame," Debray said, "you have a splendid living, an income of something like 60,000 livres, an enormous sum for a woman who will not be able to set up house for at least a year from now. This will allow you to indulge whatever notion may pass through your head, apart from which, if you should find your share inadequate in consideration of the past that is now fading away from you, you may dip into mine. I am prepared to offer you, as a loan, naturally, all that I possess, that is to say 1,060,000 francs. "Thank you, monsieur," the Baroness replied. "Thank you, but you will appreciate that what you have given me here is far more than could be required by a poor woman who does not envisage reappearing in society, at least for a long time hence." For a moment Debray was astonished, but he recovered and made a gesture that might most politely be interpreted as, "Do as you please." Up to then, Madame Danglars had perhaps continued to hope for something, but when she saw the casual gesture that Debray had just unconsciously made, and the sidelong glance that accompanied it, as well as the deep bow and significant silence that followed them, she raised her head, opened the door, and, with no outburst of anger or nerves, but also without hesitation, she swept down the stairs, not even deigning to address a nod of farewell to the man who was allowing her to leave in this manner. "Pooh!" Debray said when she had gone. "Fine plans. She will stay in her house, read novels, and play lacanette, since she cannot play on the exchange any longer." And he took up his notebook, carefully crossing out the amounts he had just paid. "I have 1,060,000 francs left," he said. "What a pity Mademoiselle de Villefort is dead. There's a woman who would have suited me in every respect. I should have married her." Phlegmatically, as usual, he waited for 20 minutes after Madame Danglars' departure before leaving himself. During these 20 minutes, he did his accounts, with his watch on the table beside him. Asmodee, that diabolical personage whom any adventurous imagination might have created with a greater or lesser degree of felicity, had Lesage not already established priority with his masterpiece. Asmodee, then, who lifted the roofs off houses in order to see inside, would have enjoyed a remarkable scene if, at the moment when Debray was doing his accounts, he had raised the top of the little boarding-house in the Rue Saint-Germain-des-Prés. Above the room in which Debray had just shared out 2.5 million francs with Madame Danglars, there was another room, also occupied by people we know, people who played an important enough role in the events which have just been described for us to take a continuing interest in them. In this room were Mercedes and Albert. Mercedes had changed a great deal in the past few days. It was not that, even at the time of her greatest wealth, she had ever displayed the proud luxury that visibly marks a person out from other ranks in society and means that one can no longer recognize her when she appears in more simple attire. Nor was it that she had fallen into that state of depression where one is driven to wear an outward appearance of misery. No, Mercedes had changed because her eyes no longer shone, her mouth no longer smiled, and a perpetual sense of constraint froze on her lips the quick retort formerly thrown up by an ever-ready wit. It was not poverty that had withered Mercedes's intelligence, or lack of courage, that made her poverty burdensome to her. Stepping down from the sphere in which she had lived, lost in the new sphere which she had chosen for herself, Mercedes was like those people who suddenly emerge out of a splendidly illuminated salon into darkness. She seemed like a queen who had left her palace for a cottage, and who, reduced to the absolute essentials, cannot recognize herself either in the earthenware dishes that she is obliged to carry to the table in her own hands, or in the straw mattress that has replaced her feather bed. Neither the beautiful Catalan nor the noble Countess had preserved her proud look or her charming smile, because when her eyes rested on what was around her, the only objects they met were distressing. The room was papered in one of those grey-on-grey papers that thrifty landlords choose because they show the dirt least. There was no carpet on the floor, and the furniture attracted attention, obliging one to contemplate the poverty and affected luxury. In short, these were all things that clashed and were liable to upset eyes accustomed to having harmony and elegance. Madame de Morcerf had been living here ever since she had left the family mansion. She found the silence dizzying, like a traveller reaching the edge of a precipice. Noticing that Albert was constantly looking at her surreptitiously to judge her state of mind, she had forced herself to wear an unchanging smile on her lips, which, since it was not accompanied by that gentle glow of a smile in the eyes, produced the same effect as simple luminescence, that is to say, light without warmth. Albert, for his part, was preoccupied, ill at ease, embarrassed by the remnants of a lifestyle that prevented him from belonging to his present state. He wanted to go out without gloves, and considered his hands too white. He wanted to walk everywhere and thought his boots were too well polished. However, these two noble and intelligent creatures, indissolubly linked by ties of maternal and filial love, could understand one another without speaking, and economize on all the niceties required between friends to accept the material truth on which life depends. At last Albert was able to say to his mother, without frightening her, "Mother, we have no money left." Mercedes had never really known destitution. Often in her youth she had herself spoken of poverty, but that is not the same thing. Need and necessity are synonyms, but there is a world of difference between them. In the Catalan village, Mercedes had needed for many things, but she never went without certain others. As long as the nets were in good repair, they caught fish, As long as the fish were sold, they had rope to repair the nets. And then, isolated from friendship, only having a love that had nothing to do with the material details of the situation, one thought of oneself, each for oneself, only oneself. From the little that she had, Mercedes used to make her share as generously as possible. Now she had 2 shares to make, and from nothing. Winter was coming on. Mercedes, in this bare room, already cold, had no fire, though once she had had a boiler which had heated the whole house from the halls to the bedrooms. She did not even have one miserable little flower, though her rooms had once been a hothouse which cost a king's ransom to furnish with plants. But she did have her son. Up to then, the joy of fulfilling, perhaps over-fulfilling their duty had kept them in a state of exaltation. Such a state is close to enthusiasm, and that makes one insensible to the things of this earth. But their enthusiasm had died down, and they had had gradually to return from the land of dreams to the world of reality. When the ideal was exhausted, they had to talk of practicalities. "Mother," Albert said, just as Madame Danglars was coming down the stairs, "let's just count all our wealth, if you don't mind. I need a total on which to build my plans." "Total? Nothing," Mercedes said with a pained smile. "On the contrary, mother, total 3,000 francs, first of all, and then I intend with those 3,000 francs to give us a truly delightful life." "My child," Mercedes sighed. "Alas, my dear mother," the young man said, "I have unfortunately spent enough of your money to know its worth. You see now, 3,000 francs is a vast sum. I have built a miraculous future on it, one of everlasting security." "You say that, my dear," the poor mother said, blushing, "but can we even accept these 3,000 francs? "I think it's agreed we can," said Albert in a firm voice. "We accept them all the more readily since we do not have them, for as you know they are buried in the garden of the little house in the Allée des Mélins in Marseille. With 200 francs, he continued, we shall both go to Marseille." "For 200 francs?" said Mercedes. "Do you really think that, Albert?" "Oh, I'm absolutely sure of it. I've inquired about coaches and steamships and done my sums. You hire your seats in the coach for Chalons. You see, mother, I'm treating you like a queen. That's 35 francs. He took a pen and wrote, "Coach, 35 francs. From Chalons to Lyon, steamship, 6 francs. From Lyon to Avignon, again steamship, 16 francs. From Avignon to Marseille, 7 francs. Travelling expenses, 50 francs. Total, 114 francs. "Let's say 120, Albert said with a smile. "See how generous I am, mother?" "But what about you, my poor boy?" "Me? Don't you see that I've left 80 francs for myself? A young man does not need a good deal of comfort. In any case, I know what it means to travel." "With your post-chaise and your valet?" "However it may be, I know, mother." "Very well," said Mercedes. "But the 200 francs?" "Here they are, and another 200. I sold my watch for 100 francs and the chain and trimmings for 300. "Isn't that splendid? A watch chain worth 3 times as much as the watch. A matter of sheer excess again. So we are rich, since of the 114 francs you needed for the journey, you now have 250. "But do we owe something for our rent here?" 30 francs, which I can take out of my 150. So it's agreed. And since I only need 80 francs myself for the journey, if it comes down to it, you can see we're in the lap of luxury. But that's not all. What do you say to this, mother?" And, out of a little wallet with a gold lock, the remnant of some past self-indulgence, or perhaps a tender souvenir of one of those mysterious veiled women who used to knock at the little door. Albert took a 1,000-franc note. "What is that?" Mercedes asked. 1,000 francs, mother. Oh, it's perfectly in order." "But where did it come from?" "Now, listen to me, mother, and don't get too excited." Albert stood up, went over to kiss his mother on both cheeks, then paused to look at her. "You have no idea, mother, how beautiful I think you are," he said with profound feelings of filial love. "You really are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, and the most noble." "Dear child," Mercedes said, trying unsuccessfully to hold back the tears that were forming in the corners of her eyes. "I do think that you needed only to be unhappy for my love to change to adoration." "I am not unhappy while I have my son," Mercedes said. "I never shall be as long as I have him." "Oh, yes, now," said Albert, "that's where the trying times will begin. You know what is agreed?" "Have we agreed something?" Mercedes asked. "Yes, it is agreed that you will live in Marseille and I shall leave for Africa. There, instead of the name I have given up, I shall make for myself the name I have adopted." Mercedes sighed. "Well, mother, yesterday I enrolled in the Spahi," the young man said, lowering his eyes with some feeling of shame, not realizing how sublime his humiliation was. "Or, rather, I thought that my body was mine and that I could sell it, since yesterday I have replaced someone. I have sold myself, as they say, and," he added, forcing a smile, "dearer than I ever expected, that is to say, for 2,000 francs. "So, this 1,000 francs?" Mercedes said, shuddering. "Half of the amount, mother, the rest in a year's time." Mercedes raised her eyes heavenwards with an expression beyond the power of any artist to depict. Her inner feelings overflowed, and the 2 tears poised on the rim of her eyelids ran silently down her cheeks. "The price of his blood," she murmured. "Yes, if I should be killed," said Morcerf with a laugh. "But I assure you, dear mother, that I have every intention of defending myself savagely. I have never felt such a strong desire to live." My God, Mercedes said. "Anyway, mother, why should I be killed? Was Lamorisse killed, that second knave from the south? Was Changarnier killed, or Bedeau? Has our friend Morel been killed? Just think how pleased you will be when you see me come home in my uniform with the braid on it. I do assure you, I intend to look quite magnificent in it. I only chose that regiment for the sake of the uniform." Mercedes sighed, while attempting to smile. The saintly woman realized that it was wrong for her to let her son bear all the weight of their sacrifice. "So, you see, mother," Albert said, "you are already guaranteed for more than 4,000 francs. With that you can live for at least 2 years. "Do you think so?" said Mercedes. The words had slipped out, and the pain behind them was so real that Albert could not help grasping their real meaning. He felt a lump in his throat, and, taking his mother's hand, clasped it tenderly in his, and said, "Oh, yes, you shall live." "I shall," Mercedes exclaimed. "But you will not go, will you, my son?" "Mother, I must," Albert said, firmly and calmly. "You love me too much to keep me beside you in fruitless idleness. In any case, I have signed my name." "You must do what you will, my son. I shall do what God wills." "Not what I will, mother, but what reason and necessity dictate. We are 2 desperate creatures, aren't we? What is life for you now? Nothing. What is life for me? Very little indeed, without you, mother, believe me. Without you, I swear, my life would have ended on the day when I first doubted my father and renounced his name. But I shall live, if you promise me that you will continue to hope." If you leave your future happiness in my care, you will double my strength. When I arrive there, I shall go and see the governor of Algeria. He is a fine man, and above all a true soldier. I will tell him my sad story and beg him to watch me from time to time. If he does so and sees how I manage, in 6 months I shall be an officer or dead. If I am an officer, mother, then your future is assured, because I shall have enough money for both of us, and a new name of which we can both be proud, since it will be your true name. If I am killed... Well, if I am killed, then, mother dear, you will die, if you please, and our misfortunes will be ended by their own excess. Very well, said Mercedes, with her noble and eloquent look. You are right, my son. Let us prove to certain people who are watching us and waiting to see what we will do to criticize us, and let us at least prove to them that we deserve their sympathy. But let's have no funereal thoughts, mother. I swear to you that we are, or at least can be, very happy. You are a woman who is both full of wit and resigned. I have become simple in my tastes, and, I hope, without passion. Once I am in the army, I shall be rich. Once you are in Monsieur Dantes's house, you will be at peace. Let's try, mother, I beg you. Let's try. Yes, my son. You must live. You must be happy, Mercedes replied. So, we each have our shares, the young man concluded, giving an appearance of being utterly at ease. We can leave today. Come then, I shall reserve your place, as they say. And yours? I must stay here 2 or 3 days more. This is a first separation, and we must get used to it. I need a few letters of recommendation and some information about Africa. Then I shall join you in Marseille. Very well then, let's go, Mercedes said, wrapping herself in the only shawl she had brought with her, which happened to be a very expensive black cashmere. Let's go. Albert hurriedly collected his papers, rang to pay the 30 francs he owed to the owner of the boarding-house, and offered his mother his arm to go down the stairs. Someone was going down in front of them, and this someone, hearing the rustling of a silk dress on the banisters, turned around. "Debray!" Albert muttered. "You, Morcerf," the minister's secretary answered, stopping on the stair where he was standing. Curiosity overcame Debray's wish to remain incognito. In any event, he had been recognized. There was something very intriguing about discovering the young man whose misfortune was the talk of the whole town in this obscure boarding-house. "Morcerf," Debray repeated. Then, noticing Madame de Morcerf's still youthful figure in the half-light and her black veil, he added, smiling, "Oh, I beg your pardon, Albert. I shall leave you." Albert understood what he was thinking. "Mother," he said, turning to Mercedes, "this is Monsieur Debray, secretary to the Minister of the Interior, and one of my former friends." "What do you mean, former?" Debray spluttered. "I say that, Monsieur Debray," Albert went on. "I say that, Monsieur Debray," Albert went on, "because today I have no more friends and must have none. I thank you very much, Monsieur, for being so good as to recognize me." Debray ran up the 2 steps and shook Albert's hand earnestly. "Believe me, my dear Albert," he said with all the feeling of which he was capable, "I sympathize deeply in the misfortune that has befallen you, and I am at your disposal for anything you should need." "Thank you, Monsieur," Albert said, smiling. "But, despite our misfortunes, we have remained rich enough not to need to apply to anyone. We are leaving Paris, and after paying for our journey, we shall have 5,000 francs left." Debray blushed. He had 1,000,000 in his portfolio. However little poetry there was in that mathematical soul, he could not escape the reflection that the same house had only a short while before contained 2 women, one of whom, justly dishonoured, had left poverty-stricken, despite the 1,500,000 francs under her cloak, while the other unjustly struck down, sublime in her misfortune, considered herself rich with a few pence. The comparison deflected his polite platitudes, and the force of the example crushed every argument. He muttered a few more or less civil words and hastened to the bottom of the stairs. That day the clerks in the ministry who worked for him had to put up with a good deal of irritation. In the evening, however, he purchased a very fine house situated on the Boulevard de la Madeleine, which brought in 50,000 francs a year. The following day, at the time when Debray was signing the deeds, that is to say about 5 o'clock in the evening, Madame de Morcerf tenderly embraced her son, and was tenderly embraced by him, then got into the stagecoach, the door of which shut behind her. A man was hidden in the courtyard of the Messagerie Laffitte, behind one of those arched mezzanine windows above each of the offices. He saw Mercedes get into the coach and saw it drive off. He watched Albert walk away. Then he drew his hand across a brow furrowed with doubt and said, "Alas, how can I give those two innocent people back the happiness I have taken away from them? God will help me." And I think there we shall take a break. Yeah. Mother, I have purchased a collection of pictures of apes which will sell for millions. Yeah, there was a bit of that, wasn't there? He's a good lad, Albert. He's a good lad. Anyway, yes, we shall take a break, go do break-related things, and we will be back in around about 5 minutes. Bye for now. And we return. We are back. Hello. I hope you have had a good break. I hope you have done break-related things. I hope you have circled your fluids, all of that fun stuff. Hope you've had a drink of some description and are sitting comfortably. Or reclining comfortably, I don't know. Whatever position you are in, I hope you are comfortable. Right. I have made myself a cup of tea, which I cannot drink yet because it's really hot. And I did very nearly make the mistake of just going, oh, I'll have a sip of... No, didn't. Don't do that. You'll burn your face. Bad idea. But yes, I hope we are enjoying so far. It feels like, quite a fun, dramatic... Well, it's always dramatic, isn't it? I don't think it's ever not dramatic, is it? A fairly dramatic episode. But yes, we have a few chapters to get through, so let us continue. Because that feels like a good thing to do. What are we on now? Chapter 107? Yes. Right. Chapter 107. The Lion's Pit. One sector of La Force, the one that contains the most dangerous prisoners and those accused of the worst crimes, is called St. Bernard's Court. But the prisoners have renamed it, in their expressive slang, the Lion's Pit, probably because the captives' teeth often gnaw the bars and sometimes the warders. This is a prison within a prison. The walls are twice as thick as elsewhere. Every day a doorkeeper carefully tests the massive railings, and one can see from the Herculean stature and cold, penetrating eyes of the warders here that they have been chosen for their physical and mental ability to inspire fear. The exercise yard for this section is enclosed in vast walls, across which the sun shines obliquely when it deigns to penetrate into this gulf of spiritual and physical ugliness. It is on those stones that, from dawn onwards, careworn, wild-eyed and wan, like ghosts, those men wander whose necks justice has bent beneath the sharpening blade. They can be seen crouching, hugging whichever wall holds most warmth. There they remain, talking in pairs, but more often alone, constantly glancing towards the door which opens to call one or other inhabitant forth from this grim place, or to fling into the gulf some new piece of detritus thrown out of the melting pot of society. St. Bernard's Court has its own visiting room, a long rectangle, divided in two by two parallel grilles set 3 feet apart, so that the visitor cannot shake hands with the prisoner or pass him anything. The interview room is dark, dank, and in every way repellent, especially when one considers the appalling secrets that have passed between the grilles and rusted the iron bars. But this place, ghastly though it is a paradise in which men whose days are numbered come to recall a society that they long for and savour. So rare is it for anyone to emerge from the Lion's Pit to go anywhere except to the Barrière Saint-Jacques, to the penal colony or to the padded cell. In the courtyard we have just described, dripping with dank humidity, a young man was walking, with his hands in the pockets of his coat. A young man who was looked on by the inhabitants of the pit with a good deal of curiosity. He would have passed for something of a dandy, thanks to the cut of his clothes, if these clothes had not been in rags. However, they were not worn out. The cloth, fine and silken where it still remained intact, would soon regain its lustre when the prisoner stroked it with his hand, trying to restore his coat. He applied the same care to holding together a lawn shirt that had considerably faded in colour since he entered the prison, and rubbed his polished boots with the corner of a handkerchief which was embroidered with initials under a heraldic crown. Some detainees in the lion's pit showed a marked interest in the prisoner's attention to his dress. "Look there, the prince is smartening himself up," one of the thieves said. "He is naturally very smart-looking," another said. "If only he had a comb and some pomade, he would outshine all those gentlemen in white gloves." "His coat must have been brand new, and his boots have a lovely polish on them. It is an honour for us to have such respectable colleagues, and the gendarmes are a real bunch of hooligans. What envy, to destroy a set of clothes like that." "They do say he's a celebrity," another added. "He's done a lot, and in style, and he's coming so young. Oh, it's marvellous." The object of this frightful admiration seemed to be savouring the praise, or the whiff of praise, because he could not hear the words. His toilet complete, he went over to the window of the canteen against which a warder was leaning. "Come, monsieur," he said, "lend me 20 francs. I'll return them very soon. You need not worry about me. Just think, some of my relatives have more millions than you have farthings. So, a matter of 20 francs, if you please, so that I can get a pistol and buy a dressing gown. I can't bear always being in a coat and boots. And what a coat, monsieur, for Prince Cavalcanti!" The warder turned his back on him and shrugged his shoulders. He didn't even laugh at these words, which would have brought a smile to anyone's lips, because he had heard many variations on a theme, or rather the same thing over and over. "Very well," Andreas said. "You are a man without feeling, and I shall get you sacked." The last remark made the warder turn around, and this time he did respond, with a huge burst of laughter. At that the other prisoners gathered around. "I am telling you," Andreas said, "that with this paltry sum I could buy myself a coat and a dressing gown, so that I shall be able to receive the illustrious visitor I am expecting any day now in an appropriate manner." He's right, the prisoners cried. "Damnation, you can see he's a proper gentleman." "Well then, you lend him the 20 francs, said the warder, shifting his weight to his other enormous shoulder. "Don't you owe that to a comrade?" "I am not the comrade of these people," the young man said proudly. "Don't insult me. You have no right to do that." The thieves looked at one another, muttering under their breath, and a storm, raised by the warder's provocation even more than by Andrea's words, began to rumble around the aristocratic prisoner. The warder, sure of doing a quos ego when the waves began to rise too high, let the storm brew a little to play a trick on the man who had been importuning him, and to give himself a little light relief in a tedious day's work. The thieves had already come close to Andrea, and some were shouting, "The slipper! The slipper!" This is a cruel game which consists in attacking a colleague who has fallen foul of these gentlemen, not with a slipper, but with a hobnailed boot. Others suggested the eel. This is a different type of entertainment, consisting in filling a twisted handkerchief with sand, pebbles, or coins, when they have any, and beating the victim around the head and shoulders with it. "Let's whip the fine fellow," some said, "the real gent." But Andrea, turning around towards them, winked, put his tongue in his cheek, and gave a clicking of the lips that meant a host of things to these bandits, who fell silent. These were Masonic signs that Caderousse had shown him, and the hooligans recognised one of their own. The handkerchiefs dropped at once, and the hobnailed slipper went back on the head executioner's foot. Some voices muttered that the gentleman was right, that he could be honest in his own way, and that the prisoners ought to set an example of freedom of thought. The riot receded. The warder was so amazed that he immediately took Andrea's hands and began to search him, attributing this sudden change in the inhabitants of the lion's pit to something other than mere hypnotism. Andrea let him, but not without protest. Suddenly there was a shout from the gates. "Benedetto?" an inspector called. The warder gave up his prey. "Someone wants me?" said Andrea. "In the visitors' room," said the voice. "You see, someone to visit me. Oh, my dear friend, you'll soon see if a Cavalcanti is to be treated like an ordinary man." Hurrying across the courtyard like a black shadow, Andrea swept through the half-opened door, leaving his fellow prisoners and even the warder looking after him admiringly. He had indeed been called into the visitors' room, and one should not be any less surprised at this than Andrea himself, because the clever young man, since he had first been put in La Force, instead of following the custom of ordinary prisoners and taking advantage of the opportunity to write and have visitors come and see him, had kept the most stoical silence. Obviously, he thought, I have some powerful protector. Everything goes to prove it. My sudden fortune, the ease with which I overcame every obstacle, a ready-made family, an illustrious name which was mine to use, the gold showered upon me, the splendid matches offered to satisfy my ambition. My good luck unfortunately failed me and my protector was away, so I was lost, but not entirely, not forever. The hand was withdrawn for a moment, but it must now reach out to me again and catch me just as I feel myself about to fall into the abyss. Why should I risk doing something unwise? Perhaps I would alienate my protector. There are two ways to get out of this spot: a mysterious escape, expensively paid for, or pressure on the judges to dismiss the case. Let's wait before speaking or acting until it is proved that I have been utterly abandoned. Then... Andrea had worked out a plan which some might consider clever. The rascal was bold in attack and tough in defence. He had put up with the wretchedness of prison and every form of deprivation. But, little by little, nature, or rather habit, regained the upper hand. He was suffering from being naked, dirty, and hungry, and time was hanging heavy on his hands. It was when he had reached this point of boredom that the inspector called him to the visitors' room. Andrea felt his heart leap with joy. It was too early for a visit from the investigating magistrate, and too late for a call from the prison director or the doctor. It must, therefore, be the visit he was expecting. He was introduced into the visiting room. There, behind the grille, his eyes wide with hungry curiosity, he saw the dark and intelligent face of Monsieur Bertuccio, who was also looking, though with painful astonishment, at the iron bars, the bolted doors, and the shadow moving behind the iron lattice. "Ah!" Andrea exclaimed, deeply touched. "Good day, Benedetto," Bertuccio said in his resounding, hollow voice. "You?" the young man exclaimed, looking around in terror. "You? You don't recognize me?" said Bertuccio. "Wretched child." "Be quiet," said Andrea, knowing that these walls had very sharp ears. "Do be quiet. My God, don't talk so loudly." "You would like me to speak, wouldn't you?" said Bertuccio. "A tete-a-tete?" "Yes, certainly," said Andrea. "Very well." After feeling around in his pocket, Bertuccio motioned to a warder who could be seen in a box behind a glass screen. "Read this." "What is it?" Andrea asked. "An order to take you into a room, to leave you there, and to let me converse with you." "Oh!" Andrea said, leaping for joy, and immediately, in his inner thoughts, he told himself, Once more, my unknown protector. I have not forgotten. He is trying to keep it quiet because we are to talk alone in a room. I've got them. Bertuccio has been sent by my protector. The warder briefly consulted his superior, then opened the 2 barred doors and led Andrea, beside himself with joy, to a room on the 1st floor with a view over the courtyard. The room was whitewashed, as prison rooms usually are. It had a pleasant appearance, which seemed delightful to the prisoner. A stove, a bed, a chair and a table made up its luxurious furnishings. Bertuccio sat down on the chair. Andrea threw himself on the bed. The warder left the room. "Now then," said the steward, "what have you to say to me?" "And you? You speak first." "Oh, no, you have a lot to tell me since you came to find me." "Very well. You have continued to pursue your criminal career. You have stolen. You have committed murder." "Poof! If it was to tell me that you had me brought to a private room, if it was to tell me that you had me brought to a private room, you might have saved yourself some time. I know all those things, but there are others that I do not know. Let's start with those, if you don't mind. Who sent you?" "Oh, you're going very fast, Monsieur Benedetto." "I am, and straight to the point. Let's not waste words. Who sent you?" "No one." "How did you know that I was in prison?" "I recognized you a long time ago in the insolent dandy who was so elegantly driving his horse down the Champs-Élysées." "The Champs-Élysées? Ah, we're getting warm, as they say in Hump the Slipper. The Champs-Élysées. So let's talk about my father, shall we?" "Who am I, then?" "You, my good sir, are my adoptive father. But I don't suppose it was you who put at my disposal some 100,000 francs which I spent in 4 or 5 months. I don't suppose it was you who forged an Italian father for me, and a nobleman. I don't suppose you were the one who introduced me to society and invited me to a certain dinner, which I can still taste in Auteuil, with the best company in Paris, including a certain crown prosecutor whose acquaintance I was mistaken not to cultivate. He could be useful to me at this moment. In short, you are not the one who stood guarantor for me for 2 million when I suffered the fatal accident of the revelation of the truth. Come, my fine Corsican, say something." "What can I say?" "I'll help you. You were talking about the Champs-Élysées just now, my dear adoptive father." "Well?" "Well, in the Champs-Élysées lives a very rich man." "You committed burglary and murder at his house?" "I do believe I did." "The Count of Monte Cristo?" "You were the one who mentioned him, as Monsieur Racine says. Well, should I throw myself into his arms, press him to my heart, and cry, 'Father, father,' as Monsieur Pierre-Écort does?" "Don't joke," Bertuccio answered. "Such a name should not be spoken here in the tone in which you dare to speak it." "Huh," said Andrea, a little stunned by the gravity of Bertuccio's demeanour. "Why not?" "Because the man who bears that name is too favoured by heaven to be the father of a wretch like yourself." "Fine words." "With fine consequences if you are not careful." "Threats. I'm not afraid of them. I'll say, 'Do you imagine you are dealing with pygmies like yourself?'" Bertuccio said, so calmly and with such a confident look that Andrea was shaken to the core. "Do you imagine you are dealing with one of your ordinary convicts or your weak-minded society gulls? Benedetto, you are in dreadful hands. These hands are ready to open for you. Take advantage of it. But don't play with the lightning that they may put down for a moment but will pick up again if you try to hamper their freedom of movement." "My father! I want to know who my father is," Andrea said obstinately. "I'll die in the attempt if I must, but I will find out. What does a scandal mean to me? Good reputation, publicity, as Beauchamp the journalist says. But the rest of you who belong to society always have something to lose by scandal, for all your millions and your coats of arms. So, who is my father?" "I have come to tell you." "Ah!" Benedetto cried, his eyes shining. At that moment the door opened, and the keeper said to Bertuccio, "Excuse me, monsieur, but the investigating magistrate is waiting for the prisoner." "That's the end of the inquiry into my case?" Andrea told the good steward. "Damn him for disturbing us." "I'll come back tomorrow," said Bertuccio. "Very well," Andrea replied. "Gentlemen of the watch, Gentlemen of the watch, I am all yours. Oh, my good sir, please leave the guard 10 écus or so, for them to give me what I need in here." "It will be done," Bertuccio replied. Andrea offered his hand. Bertuccio kept his in his pocket and merely jingled a few coins with it. "That's what I meant," Andrea said, forcing a smile, but in fact quite overwhelmed by Bertuccio's calm manner. "Could I have been wrong?" he wondered, getting into the oblong vehicle with its barred windows, which is called the Black Maria. "We'll see. So, until tomorrow," he added, turning to Bertuccio. "Until tomorrow," said the steward. Chapter 108. The Judge. It will be recalled that Abbé Busoni had remained alone with Noirtier in the funerary chamber, and that it was the old man and the priest who had taken on the task of watching over the young girl's body. Perhaps the abbé's Christian exhortations, or his gentle charity, or his winning words had restored the old man's courage, because as soon as he had the opportunity to confer with the priest, instead of the despair that had at first overwhelmed him, everything in Noirtier spoke of great resignation, and this calm was all the more surprising to those who remembered the deep affection that he felt for Valentine. Monsieur de Villefort had not seen the old man since the morning of her death. The whole household had been renewed. Another valet was hired for himself, another servant for Noirtier. 2 women had come into Madame de Villefort's service, and all of them, right down to the concierge and the chauffeur, provided new faces which had, so to speak, risen up between the different masters in this accursed household and interposed themselves in the already quite cold relationships between them. In any case, the assizes opened in 3 days, and Villefort, shut up in his study, was feverishly working on the indictment against Caderousse's murderer. This affair, like all those in which the Count of Monte Cristo was involved, had caused a great stir in Paris. The evidence was not conclusive, since it relied on a few words written by a dying convict, a former fellow inmate of the man he was accusing, who might be acting out of hatred or for revenge. The magistrate was morally certain, but nothing more. The Crown Prosecutor had eventually succeeded in acquiring for himself the dreadful certainty that Benedetto was guilty, and this difficult victory was to reward him with one of those satisfactions to his vanity which were the only pleasures that still touched the fibres of his icy heart. So the trial opened, thanks to Villefort's unending work. He wanted to make it the first case to be heard at the next assizes, so he had been obliged to hide himself away even more than usual in order to avoid answering the huge number of demands for tickets to the hearing that were addressed to him. Moreover, so little time had passed since poor Valentine had been laid to rest. The family's grief was still so recent that no one was surprised to see the father so totally absorbed in his duties, that is to say, in the only thing that might take his mind off his sorrow. Only once, the day after Benedetto had received a second visit from Bertuccio, the one when he was to tell him the name of his father. In fact, the day after that, which was Sunday, only once, as we say, did Villefort notice his father. This was at a moment when the magistrate, overcome with tiredness, had gone down into the garden of his house, and dark, bent beneath some implacable thought, like Tarquin cutting the heads off the tallest poppies with his cane, Monsieur de Villefort was knocking down the long, dying stems of the hollyhocks that rose on either side of the path, like the ghosts of those flowers that had been so brilliant in the season that had just passed away. He had already more than once reached the end of the garden, that is to say, the famous gate overlooking the abandoned field, from which he would always return by the same path, resuming his walk at the same pace and repeating the same gestures, when he looked up, mechanically, towards the house, where he could hear his son playing noisily. The boy had come home from boarding school to spend Sunday and Monday with his mother. At that moment, he saw Monsieur Noirtier at one of the open windows. The old man had had his chair brought up to that window to enjoy the last rays of the still warm sun as it came to bid farewell to the dying convolvulus flowers and the reddened leaves of the vines entwined around the balcony. The old man's eye was fixed, as it were, on a point which Villefort could only imperfectly distinguish. His look was so full of hatred and savagery, and burned with such impatience, that the Crown Prosecutor, accustomed to interpreting every nuance of the features that he knew so well, stepped aside from his route to see who could have attracted such a powerful look. Under a group of lime trees, almost entirely bare of leaves, he saw Madame de Villefort, sitting with a book in her hand and looking up from her reading at intervals to smile at her son, or to throw back the rubber ball which he insisted on throwing from the drawing-room into the garden. Villefort paled, knowing what the old man wanted. Noirtier was still looking at the same spot, but his eyes often turned from the wife to the husband, and then Villefort himself had to suffer the onslaught of those devastating eyes, which, as they switched from one object to another, also changed in meaning, though without losing any of their threatening expression. Madame de Villefort, quite unaware of these passions, beamed back and forth above her head, was at that moment holding her son's ball and motioning him to come and fetch it with a kiss, but Edouard took a lot of persuading. A kiss from his mother probably seemed insufficient reward for the trouble he would have to take. Finally he made up his mind, jumped out of the window into a bed of asters and heliotropes, and ran over to Madame de Villefort, his forehead bathed in sweat. Madame de Villefort wiped it dry, put her lips to the damp ivory, and sent the child off with his ball in one hand and sweets in the other. Villefort, drawn by an invisible magnet, like a bird fascinated by a snake, came towards the house. As he approached, Noirtier's eyes were lowered to follow him, and the fire in his pupils seemed to reach such a degree of incandescence that Villefort felt it eating into the depths of his heart. There was indeed a fearsome reproach to be read in those eyes, as well as a dreadful threat. Then Noirtier's eyes and eyelids were raised towards heaven, as if reminding his son of a forgotten oath. "Very well, monsieur," Villefort replied, stepping into the courtyard. "Very well. Be patient for 1 day more. I shall do as I said." Noirtier seemed to be calmed by these words, and his eyes turned indifferently away. Villefort swiftly unbuttoned the frock-coat that was stifling him, passed a pale hand across his brow, and went back into his study. The night passed, cold and calm. Everyone went to bed and slept as usual in the house. Only Villefort, as usual, did not go to bed with the rest, but worked until 5 in the morning, running over the last interrogations carried out the day before by the investigating magistrates, studying the evidence of witnesses and clarifying the language of his own opening speech, one of the most powerful and subtly written that he had ever made. The first session of the assizes was to take place on the following day, Monday. Villefort saw that day dawn, sinister and sickly pale, its bluish light reflecting off the lines on the paper, written in red ink. The judge had fallen asleep for a moment while his lamp burned itself out. He was woken by its spluttering, his hands damp and ink-stained as if he had dipped them in blood. He opened his window. A wide orange band crossed the distant horizon, cutting across the slender poplars outlined in black against the sky. In the field of alfalfa, beyond the wall by the chestnut trees, a skylark winged its way into the heavens, followed by its clear morning song. The damp air of dawn flooded over Villefort's head, awakening his memory. "Today will be the day," he forced himself to say. "Today the man who is to hold the sword of justice must strike wherever the guilty one may be." Involuntarily his eyes turned towards Noirtier's window, which was at right angles to his, the window where he had seen the old man the evening before. The curtain was drawn. Yet the image of his father was so clear in his mind that he spoke to the closed window as if it had been open, and through the opening he could see the threatening old man. "Yes," he muttered, "don't worry." His head fell back on his chest, and, with it bowed, he walked a few times round his study before finally throwing himself, fully dressed, on a sofa, not so much to sleep as to loosen his limbs, which were stiff with tiredness and the chill of work which reached right to the marrow of the bones. Little by little, everyone woke up. Villefort, in his study, heard the successive noises that, as it were, made up the life of the house, the doors opening and closing, the ringing of Madame de Villefort's bell, summoning her maid, the first cries of the child, who got up merrily as one does at that age. Villefort himself rang. His new valet came in, bringing the newspapers together with a cup of chocolate. "What's that you're bringing me?" Villefort asked. "A cup of chocolate. I didn't ask for it. Who is taking such care of me?" "Madame. She said that Monsieur would no doubt have to speak a good deal today in that matter of the murder, and that he needed to build up his strength." And the valet put down the vermeil cup on the table beside the sofa, a table which, like the rest, was covered in papers. Then he went out. Villefort looked grimly for a moment at the cup, then suddenly grabbed it and drank down the contents in a single draught. It was as though he hoped that the liquid was some deadly poison, and that he was calling on death to release him from a duty that was ordering him to do something much more difficult than dying. Then he got up and walked round his study with a sort of smile which would have been terrible to see had there been anyone to see it. The chocolate was harmless, and Monsieur de Villefort felt no ill effects. When breakfast time arrived, Monsieur de Villefort did not appear at the table. The valet came back to the study. "Madame wishes to inform Monsieur that 11 o'clock has just struck," he said, "and that the session opens at midday." "So?" said Villefort. "Madame's toilet is complete. She is quite ready, and wishes to know if she will be accompanying Monsieur." "Where?" "To the law courts." "What for?" "Madame says that she would very much like to be present at the session." "Ah!" Villefort said in almost terrifying tones. "Does she really?" The servant shrank back and said, "If Monsieur would like to go out alone, I shall inform Madame." For a moment Villefort said nothing, but scratched his cheek, pale in contrast to his ebony black beard. "Tell Madame," he said finally, "that I should like to speak to her, and that she should expect me in her rooms." "Yes, Monsieur." "Then come back to shave and dress me." "Immediately." The valet disappeared briefly, then returned to shave Villefort and solemnly dress him in black. When he had finished, he said, "Madame says that she will expect Monsieur as soon as he is ready." "I am going." With his dossiers under his arm and his hat in his hand, Villefort set off towards his wife's apartments. At the door he stopped for a moment and wiped away the sweat that was running down his livid white forehead. Then he pushed open the door. Madame de Villefort was sitting on an ottoman, impatiently leafing through some newspapers and brochures that young Edouard was tearing in pieces even before his mother had had time to finish reading them. She was completely dressed to go out. Her hat was waiting for her on a chair, and she had her gloves on. "Ah, here you are, monsieur." "Excuse me," she said quite calmly, in her ordinary voice. "Good heavens, how pale you are! Have you been working all night again? Why didn't you come down to have luncheon with me? So, are you going to take me, or shall I go on my own with Edouard?" As one can see, Madame de Villefort had asked one question after another in order to get some response, but Monsieur de Villefort remained cold and silent as a statue at every inquiry. "Edouard," he said, fixing the child with a commanding look, "go and play in the drawing-room. I have something to say to your mother." This cold stare, resolute voice, and unexpected introduction made Madame de Villefort shudder. Edouard had looked up at his mother, and, when she did not confirm Monsieur de Villefort's orders, went back to cutting the heads off his lead soldiers. "Edouard!" Monsieur de Villefort shouted, so harshly that the child leapt up on the carpet. "Do you hear me? Go!" The child, unaccustomed to such treatment, got up, ashen-faced, though it was hard to say whether from anger or fear. His father went over to him, took his arm and kissed his forehead. "Go on, child," he said. Edouard went out. Monsieur de Villefort walked over to the door and locked it. "My heavens!" the young woman said, looking deep into her husband's soul and starting to form a smile which was frozen by Villefort's impassive stare. "What is the matter?" "Madame, where do you keep the poison that you habitually use?" the magistrate said, clearly and unambiguously, standing between his wife and the door. Madame de Villefort felt what a lark must feel when it sees the tightening circle of the kite above its head. A harsh, broken sound, somewhere between a cry and a sigh, burst from her chest, and she went as white as a sheet. "Monsieur," she said, I don't understand." She had leapt up in a paroxysm of terror, and now, in a second paroxysm that seemed even stronger than the first, she collapsed back onto the cushions on the sofa. "I asked you," Villefort said in a perfectly calm voice, "where you keep the poison with which you killed my father-in-law, Monsieur de Saint-Marin, my mother-in-law, Barrois, and my daughter, Valentine." "Oh, monsieur!" Madame de Villefort cried, clasping her hands. "What are you saying?" "It is not your place to question me, but to reply." To the husband or the judge?" Madame de Villefort stammered. "To the judge, madame, to the judge." The woman's pallor, her anguished expression, and the trembling that shook her whole body were dreadful to behold. "Oh, monsieur," she muttered. "Oh, monsieur." Nothing more. "You do not answer me, madame," said her terrible questioner. Then he added, with a smile that was even more terrifying than his anger, "It is true that you don't deny it." She shrank back. "And you cannot deny it," Villefort added, stretching his hand towards her as if to seize her in the name of justice. "You carried out these different crimes with impudent skill. though it could only have deceived those whose affection for you predisposed them to blindness where you were concerned. After Madame de Saint-Marin's death, I knew that there was a poisoner in my house. Monsieur d'Avrigny had warned me of it. After the death of Bauer, God forgive me, my suspicions turned towards someone, towards an angel, those suspicions which, even when no crime has been committed, are always smouldering in the depth of my heart. But after Valentine's death, I could have no further doubt, madame, and not only I, but others. So your crime, which is known now to 2 people and suspected by many, will be made public. As I said to you a moment ago, madame, it is no longer your husband who is speaking to you, but your judge. The young woman hid her face in both hands. Oh, monsieur, she stammered, I beg you, don't be misled by appearances. Can you be a coward? Villefort cried in a contemptuous voice. I have indeed always noticed that the poisoners are cowards. But are you a coward who had enough frightful courage to watch 2 old people and a girl die in front of you when you had killed them? Can you be a coward? He continued in growing excitement. You who have counted out 1 by 1 the minutes of 4 death agonies. You who have concocted your infernal plans and your criminal potions with such miraculous skill and precision. You who have devised all that so well, could you have forgotten to calculate one thing, namely, where the revelation of your crimes might lead? No, that's impossible. You must have kept some sweeter, subtler, and more lethal poison to escape from your just deserts. I hope at least you have done that. Madame de Villefort wrung her hands and fell to her knees. I know, he said, you confess. But a confession made in court, a last-minute confession, a confession when the facts can no longer be denied, such a confession does not in any way mitigate the punishment inflicted on the guilty party. Punishment? Madame de Villefort cried. Punishment? Monsieur, that is twice that you have spoken that word, I think. Indeed, so. Is it because you are 4 times guilty that you thought you would escape scot-free? Is it because you are the wife of him who demands punishment that you thought to evade it? Whoever she may be, the scaffold awaits the poisoner, especially, as I have just said, if she did not take care to reserve a few drops of her most lethal poison for herself. Madame de Villefort gave a wild cry, and hideous and uncontrollable terror swept over her ravaged features. Oh, do not fear the scaffold, madame, the magistrate said. I do not wish to dishonour you, because that would be to dishonour myself. No, on the contrary, if you have fully understood what I said, you will realize that you cannot die on the scaffold. No, I have not understood. What do you mean? The unhappy woman stammered, completely aghast. I mean that, by her infamy, the wife of the chief magistrate of Paris will not soil a name which has so far been without blemish, or dishonour her husband and her child. No. Oh, no. Very well, madame. That will be a fine action on your part, and I thank you for it. Thank me? What for? What you have just said. What I have just said? My head is reeling. I don't understand anything any more. Oh, my God! Oh, my God! And she looked up, her hair dishevelled, her lips foaming. You have not replied, madame, to the question which I put you on entering this room. Where is the poison which you habitually use, madame? Madame de Villefort raised her arms towards heaven and convulsively wrung her hands. No, she cried, no, you cannot want that. What I do not want, madame, is for you to perish on the scaffold, said Villefort. Do you understand that? Oh, monsieur, spare me. What I do want is for justice to be done. I have been put on earth to punish, madame," he added, his eyes blazing. "To any other woman, even a queen, I should send the executioner, but on you I shall have mercy. To you I shall say, 'Is it not true, madame, that you have kept a few drops of your gentlest, quickest, and most infallible poison?'" "Oh, forgive me, monsieur, let me live." "She was a coward," said Villefort. "Consider that I am your wife." "You are a poisoner." "In heaven's name, no." "In the name of the love you once had for me." "No, no." "In the name of our child. Oh, for our child's sake, let me live." "No, I tell you. One day, if I should let you live, you might kill him as you did the others." "I? Kill my son?" the mother cried, wildly hurling herself on Villefort. "I kill my Edouard? Oh, oh!" And the sentence ended in a terrible laugh, a demonic laugh, the laugh of a mad woman, and was drowned by a bloody croak. Madame de Villefort had fallen at her husband's feet. Villefort went over to her. "Consider this, madame," he said. "If, on my return, justice has not been done, I shall denounce you with my own lips and arrest you with my own hands." She listened, panting, exhausted, crushed. Only her eye still lived, smouldering with an awful fire. "Do you hear me?" Villefort asked. "I am going there to demand the death penalty against a murderer. If I come back to find you still alive, you will sleep in the conciergerie this evening." Madame de Villefort gave a sigh, her nerves gave way, and she fell, a broken woman, on the carpet. The Crown Prosecutor seemed to feel a pang of pity. He looked at her less severely, and, bending gently over her, said slowly, "Adieu, madame, adieu." This last farewell fell like the fatal blade on Madame de Villefort. She fainted. The Crown Prosecutor left the room, and after doing so, double-locked the door. Chapter 109. The Assizes. The Benedetto affair, as it was called in the courts and in society, had created an enormous sensation. A frequenter of the Café de Paris, the Boulevard de Gand, and the Bois de Boulogne, the pseudo-Cavalcanti, while he had been in Paris, and for the 2 or 3 months that his glory had lasted, had met a host of people. The newspapers had described the accused in his different incarnations, in society and in prison, so there was tremendous curiosity on the part of everyone who had been personally acquainted with Prince Andrea Cavalcanti. It was these, above all, who had decided to risk anything to get a glimpse of Monsieur Benedetto, murderer of his fellow convict, while he stood in the dock. To many people, Benedetto was, if not a victim of the law, at least of a judicial error. Monsieur Cavalcanti, the father, had been seen in Paris, and they expected him to appear once more to claim his illustrious offspring. Several people, who had never heard speak of the famous Polish woman with whom he arrived at the Count of Monte Cristo's, had been struck by the imposing air, perfect good manners, and urbanity shown by the old nobleman, who, it must be admitted, appeared a flawless aristocrat, provided he was not doing his sums or talking about them. As for the accused man himself, many people remembered him as so pleasant, so handsome, and so generous that they preferred to believe in some machination by an enemy of the kind that is found in that portion of society where great wealth increases the means to do ill or to do good to such a fabulous extent, and the power to do these things to an unheard-of degree. So everyone was hastening to the assizes, some to enjoy the spectacle, others to comment on it. A queue started to form outside the gates at 7 o'clock in the morning, and 1 hour before the session began, the courtroom was already full of those who had some leverage there. Before the judge enters, and often even afterwards, a courtroom A courtroom on the day of some great trial resembles a drawing room in which a lot of people recognise one another, meet when they are close enough not to lose their seats, or make gestures at one another when they are separated by too many spectators, lawyers or gendarmes. It was one of those splendid autumn days that sometimes compensate for the lack of the preceding summer, or its brevity. The clouds that Monsieur de Villefort had seen passing in front of the sun had dispersed as though by magic, and allowed one of the last and sweetest September days to shine in all its purity. Beauchamp was one of the kings of the press, and consequently had his throne everywhere. Eyeing the crowd to right and left, he noticed Chateau Renard and Debray, who had just won the favour of a sergeant-at-arms, who had decided to stand behind them instead of blocking their view as was his right. The good fellow had scented the presence of a secretary at the ministry and a millionaire, and was showing himself full of consideration for his fine neighbours, even allowing them to go and see Beauchamp while promising to keep their places. "Well then," Beauchamp said, "have we come to see our friend?" "Heavens, yes, we have," Debray replied. "A fine prince he was. Devil take these Italian princes." "A man who had Dante for his genealogist and could trace his line back to the Divine Comedy." "The nobility of the rope," Chateau Renard said coolly. "He will be condemned, I suppose?" Debray asked Beauchamp. "My dear fellow," the journalist replied, "I should think you were the person one should ask about that. You know the political climate better than we do. Did you see the president at the last soirée in your ministry?" "Yes." "What did he say?" "Something that will surprise you." "Well then, do tell me quickly, my dear chap. It's so long since I heard anything that did that." "Well, he told me that Benedetto, who's considered a firebird of subtlety and a giant of cunning, is only a very subordinate, very naive rogue, quite undeserving of the experiments which will be made on his phrenological organs once he is dead." "Pooh!" Beauchamp said. "He played the prince well enough for all that." "For you, perhaps, Beauchamp. You hate these poor princes so much that you are delighted if they misbehave. But I can sniff out a true gentleman straight away, and spring an aristocratic family, whatever it may be, like a heraldic bloodhound." "So you never believed in his principality?" "In his principality, yes, but in his princedom, no." "Not bad," said Debray, "but I assure you that he could get by with anyone else. I saw him with the ministers." "Oh yes," said Chateau Renard, "for all that your ministers know about princes." "There are some good things in what you have just said," Beauchamp answered, bursting into laughter. "The phrase is short, but rather fine. I ask your permission to use it in my report." "Take it, my dear Monsieur Beauchamp," said Chateau Renard. "You can have my phrase for what it's worth." "But if I spoke to the president," Debray said to Beauchamp, "you must have spoken to the Crown Prosecutor." "Impossible. Monsieur de Villefort has locked himself away for the past week. It's quite natural after that odd series of domestic misfortunes culminating in the strange death of his daughter." "The strange death? What do you mean, Beauchamp?" "Oh, yes, pretend to know nothing, on the grounds that all this is taking place among the peerage," Beauchamp said, putting his pince-nez to his eye and forcing it to stay up by itself. "My dear sir," said Chateau Renard, "let me tell you that, as far as the pince-nez is concerned, you cannot hold a candle to Debray. Debray, do give Monsieur Beauchamp a lesson." "Look," Beauchamp said, "I'm sure I'm not mistaken." "What about?" "It's her." "Her who?" "They said she had gone." "Mademoiselle Eugénie?" Chateau Renard asked. "Is she back already?" "No, not her, her mother." "Madame Danglars?" Come, said Chateau Renard. "It can't be. 10 days after her daughter has run off and 3 days after her husband's bankruptcy? Debray blushed slightly and followed Beauchamp's eyes. "Come on," he said. "That's a veiled woman, a stranger, some foreign princess, perhaps Prince Cavalcanti's mother. But you were saying, or rather about to say, something really interesting, I think, Beauchamp." "I was?" "Yes, you were talking about Valentine's strange death." "Oh, yes, so I was. But why isn't Madame de Villefort here?" "Poor woman," said Debray. "No doubt she is making balm for the hospitals and inventing cosmetics for herself and her friends. You know she spends 2,000 or 3,000 écus at that game, so they assure me. And you're right. Why isn't she here? I should have been very pleased to see her. I like her very much." "And I hate her," said Château-Renard. "Why?" "I don't know. Why does one love or hate? I hate her for reasons of antipathy." "Or instinctively, of course." "Perhaps. But let's get back to what you were saying, Beauchamp." "Well, are you not curious to know, gentlemen, why they are dying so repetitiously in the Villefort family?" "Repetitiously in the Villefort family? I like that. Repetitiously," said Château-Renard. "You'll find the word in St. Simon." "And the thing in Monsieur de Villefort's house. So, tell us about it." "Good Lord," said Debray. "I must confess, I have not taken my eyes off that house which has been dressed in mourning for 3 whole months. And only the day before yesterday, on the subject of Valentine, Madame was saying—" "Madame is who, precisely?" Château-Renard asked. "Why, the minister's wife, of course." "Oh, I beg your pardon," said Château-Renard. "I do not frequent ministers. I leave that to princes." "You used merely to be handsome, but yet now you are starting to blaze with glory. Have pity on us, Baron, or you will burn us like a second Jupiter." "I shall not say another word," said Château-Renard. "But for God's sake, have pity on me. Don't cap every remark I make." Come, let's try to finish what we were saying, Beauchamp. Now, I was telling you that Madame asked me about the matter the day before yesterday. You tell me, I'll tell her." "Well, gentlemen, if people are dying in the Villefort family so repetitiously, and I stick by the word, that means there is a murderer in the house." The 2 young men shuddered, because the same idea had struck them more than once. "And who is the murderer?" they asked. "Young Edouard." The speaker was not at all put out by a burst of laughter from his audience, but went on, "Yes, gentlemen, young Edouard, an infant phenomenon, who is already killing as well as his parents ever did." "This is a joke." "Not in the slightest. Yesterday I took on a servant who has just left the Villeforts, and listen to this." "We're listening." "I shall sack him tomorrow, because he eats a vast quantity to make up for the terrified abstinence that he imposed on himself while he was there. Well, it appears that the dear child got his hands on some flask of a drug which he uses from time to time against those who displease him. Firstly, it was Grandpa and Grandma Saint-Marin who annoyed him, and he poured them 3 drops of his elixir. 3 were enough. Then it was good old Barrois, Grandpa Nortier's old servant, who would occasionally scold the dear little imp. So the little imp gave him 3 drops of the elixir. The same was the fate of poor Valentine, not because she scolded him, she didn't, but because he was jealous of her. He gave her 3 drops of his elixir, and her day was done, as it was for the rest." "What fairy story is this you are telling us?" Château-Renard asked. "Yes," Beauchamp said, "a tale of the beyond." "It's absurd," said Debray. "There," Beauchamp said, "you see, you're already playing for time. Damn it, ask my servant, or rather the man who won't be my servant tomorrow. Everyone in the family talked about it." "But where is this elixir? What is it?" "Of course the child hides it." "Where did he get it?" "In his mother's laboratory." "Does his mother have poisons in her laboratory?" "How do I know? You're interrogating me like the Crown Prosecutor. All I can say is what I've been told, and I'm giving you my source. I can't do better than that. The poor devil was too terrified to eat." "Incredible." No, my good chap, not incredible at all. You saw that child in the Rue Richelieu last year who entertained himself by killing his brothers and sisters by sticking a pin in their ears while they were asleep. The generation after our own is very precocious, old boy. I'm prepared to bet that you don't believe a word of it, Chateau Renard said. But I don't see the Count of Monte Cristo. How can he not be here? He's blasé, Debray said. He wouldn't want to appear here in front of everyone after he'd been taken in by all these Cavalcantis who came to him, apparently with false letters of credit, with the result that he has a mortgage of 100,000 francs on the principality. By the way, Monsieur de Chateau Renard, Beauchamp asked, how is Morel? Do you know? He answered. I'd been round to his house 3 times and found neither hide nor hair of Morel. But his sister didn't seem too worried about it, and told me quite calmly that she had not seen him for 2 or 3 days either, but that she was sure he was well. I've just thought. Monte Cristo can't be here, said Beauchamp. Why not? Because he's part of the case. Has he killed someone? Debray asked. No, on the contrary, he's the one somebody tried to kill. You know that it was while he was coming out of Monte Cristo's that fine fellow Caderousse was murdered by the young Benedetto. Moreover, it was in the Count's house that they found the famous waistcoat in which there was the letter that interrupted the signing of the marriage contract. Can you see the famous waistcoat? There it is, all bloody, on the desk as evidence. Oh, wonderful. Hush, gentlemen, the court is in session. Take your places. There was some commotion in the court. The sergeant-at-arms called his 2 protégés with a loud ahem, and the usher, appearing on the threshold of the council chamber, cried out, in that yelping voice that ushers had already acquired in Beaumarchais' time, Gentlemen, all rise! And I think there is where we shall end for tonight.